you know, I won't use the cliche of a historic day, but it's definitely a major milestone for ATU iHubs. I suppose as we recognise the outstanding leadership and contribution that George has given to ATU over his career here. And I'm delighted to see Orla Flynn, the president of ATU, in the audience. And I'm very, very pleased that George's family could make it. His loving wife, Rosaline, George, Ruth, and of course, Mark as well. So it's really great to have you here today. So just really to go through the running of the day, it's mainly going to be people just coming up and just, I suppose, doing maybe some thank yous and maybe reminiscing a little bit as well. So there isn't too many slides to go through, maybe one or two videos and not a whole lot really. So really, I suppose, without further ado, just to get the show on the road, as they say, I'd like to invite Orla Flynn to come up and maybe to say a few words. Thanks, Orla.
So George, Rosaline, McCourt family, colleagues, friends, guests. It's not often when I get a phone call. I mean, my job can be hard at times, same as everybody's job, but mostly I think I keep a lid on it. And it's not often that when I get a phone call, my response is to issue a loud wail and bury my head in my hands. But I did get such a phone call a couple of months back when George rang me to tell me he was retiring. And I think, I think that says it all about what you've meant to this organization. And I suppose my first time hearing about George McCourt was when I worked in Cork Institute of Technology. And at the time, I spent about 6 years leading a function which included the Rubicon, the Innovation Centre there, the iHub equivalent in Cork. And I heard a lot about you, George, in that time. But that meant that when I came and I started in GMIT, I had a good understanding of the struggles that you would have had here. I would have understood the importance of having the extension to the iHub and the potential that would have meant not just for GMIT at the time, but also the wider Galway and the West of Ireland region. I was delighted that the work was underway already before I arrived, and it was wonderful. When we opened the extension here, and this beautiful, beautiful facility has been commented on by so many people, particularly at nighttime when you drive out. It's just a real beacon, I think, of progress. And none of that would have happened without your hard work and your vision and your collegiality, working with others right around the sector, working very closely with Enterprise Ireland, not just around this building, but in relation to the things that go on in this building. My work with the Rubicon probably would have given me insight into New Frontiers, obviously, entrepreneurship programs. And one of the kind of big thematic conversations when we became ATU was, how do we unite our enterprise efforts? How do we think about, supporting the regions in which we have our campuses? And the Technological Universities Act of 2018 calls for us to be so much more than providing education to students who come in. And I know today is a big red letter day for the CAO students, but our role is so much more than that. Our role is about enabling the region, and I'm going to say the wider northern western region, to be a thriving region, and a region which holds on to its young people, and a region that attracts other young people and not so young people to live in as a healthy region where we can enjoy our lives and we can do well. And you've played a huge role in that, not just in the immediate Galway region. You've been part of a really interesting, I'm going to say, innovation ecosystem where we've great collegiality between all the various players in that here in Galway. And then you went on to play such a big role when we became ATU just over 3 years ago. I am sorry that I'm not here to see the next iteration of that. I think we had made great progress in terms of looking at the innovation hub that we have in Mayo. Obviously was always part of your remit, but in Sligo and in Letterkenny in the CoLab, seeing us working together is going to be something magical in the huge in that. You've also played a role in helping us shape our thinking around entrepreneurship in the university. Obviously, the New Frontiers is funded by Enterprise Ireland, is a program that's been around for many years now. And looking at the way we've been running that between Galway and Mayo and now Sligo and Letterkenny, and bringing a lens of wisdom to all of that, and trying to replicate good practices right across the university, trying to see, well, if there's good things happening in one place, can we replicate them somewhere else? And that's going to be part of our task. Supporting our students was something that I talked to you about in my very early days when I came to GMIT as president. What is the wider role that this venue can play in the lives of our students? Do they understand that there are multiple career choices for them, that having an entrepreneurial and innovative mindset is something that can stand to them, whether they start their own business or they get hired by a multinational? It's that way of thinking, it's that way of looking for new solutions and new ideas. And I'm really pleased that, in your work with Finola and Ivan, that in our wider entrepreneurship ethos played a big role in shaping the there. So there's probably a lot more to be said. I know there's a good few speakers coming up to reminisce. I was so pleased to get the chance to go to Chicago with you quite recently and get a chance to see you in action up close. And I think that the legacy that you leave for us won't be replicated. You played such a role, not just for GMIT, ATU, but also not just in the wider Galway, but in the wider west of Ireland and now in the northwestern region. I didn't mention the link with the Met Gateway, but again, the knowledge transfer, the role of the innovation hubs, and that collaboration between here and the Met Gateway is an exemplar. And delighted to see colleagues from other innovation hubs in ATU and the gateways right across ATU here today to celebrate. Well, I'm going to say celebrate reluctantly, but to mark today. I don't think we'll get our calls out of you so easily, George. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to the rest of our speakers. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Orla, for those words and for welcoming all the other centres that are here today. I suppose the audience is really representative of pretty much everything you said in terms of all the different groups and external partners that we have here today. So following on from Orla's words, I'd like to, if we can get the presentation go here, I'd like to invite Dr. Des Foley to come up to the stage. And Dr. Des Foley is the Acting Vice President of Innovation, Research and Innovation here in ATU. And he would have worked with George over the years, so I'm sure he'll have a lot of stories to tell.
Good afternoon, everybody. That's true. I mean, I probably met George even before the building was kitted out. The original building, I don't mean this one, way back when, and he was trying to get his first clients into the building. It's opportune that Orla mentioned the freshers and the new academic year starting and the offers going out, because one of Orla's predecessors, Marion Coy, she used to go in and meet the first years and recall things that happened in the year of their birth. And if you're any sort of an age at all, you'd be there thinking, was that 18 years ago? You couldn't believe it. I was going to do the same with George, but I thought I'd do. But I came right up to date. So I put George McCourt into Chat GPT to see what would come out. And I was kind of hoping some clandestine activity, maybe a betting syndicate going in Roscommon or something like that would crop up. But to quote what ChatGPT, first thing it said was, I wasn't able to find one standout public figure named George McCourt. That was a little bit of a letdown, George, but it did give me 4 options, one of which was the head of innovation, George I, head of innovation and enterprise at ATU Hubs. Then we had George II, real estate executive at McCourt Partners. Then we George H. McCourt, an academic in environmental sciences at McGill University, and several historical and genealogical figures, including a member of the household born in 1837. Again, probably not George, yeah, just a little bit out of the way there. But then when I did specify I want George I, it then came back with the key characteristics of this person. Here's an image. Actually, the image was wrong, but then it did show me industry leadership, number 1, 30 years experience. McCourt brings extensive expertise in operations, quality, logistics, and so on. Second one was program leadership. Talked a little bit about the Enterprise Ireland programs, and then driving innovation. Talked about the DTIF fund, amazing, and then talked about George's testament to innovation and linking it with academia and so on. And then really important thing, fostering collaborations. He champions partnerships both with startups and established med tech firms, highlighting facilities, incubation facilities, and so on. But that's pretty good. But of course, what that doesn't do is it doesn't talk about the person behind those professional attributes. And that's what I'd just like to spend the remainder of my time in talking about. And if I was kind of think of a few words that would sum up George, certainly one of them would be judgment. He always had brilliant judgment. I remember Declan Lyons years ago, in whatever context we were talking about from Enterprise Ireland, I don't know how long Declan's retired now. He said he'd always call George first if he wanted to get a feeling of something or other to put into, you know, a new scheme or a new plan or some way of doing funding. And that, I think, was very strong testament to him. And I certainly would have found that as well. You could always call George and say, what do you think of that? And like, George would be cagey or cautious enough, like he wouldn't, like I'd be maybe the opposite, and I'd be saying, oh, can we go off and give that a go? And he'd say, I'll hold your horses there, let's think it through. He's also very dependable and really well organized. If you ever go to a meeting with George, he'll want his agenda. If he wants to get things out of the meeting or talk to you about certain points, he'll have them all listed out on his A4 pad, and he'll go through them one by one and tick them. That stands really to running a place like this and setting a place up and getting it running. You know, just didn't happen by accident. And the growth of this centre, and now, you know, obviously George has worked with the other centres over the last while. He certainly is persistent. You know, if he felt something was worth following and going for, he wouldn't take no the first time. He'll try and think of another way of trying to pursue it and get back again. You know, maybe with a different lens, maybe with a different line, but he would be persistent for things that he knows are worthwhile and genuine in the end. And then a real eye for detail. You know, he can look at the broader strategic stuff. And I remember it was even before Enterprise Ireland had put out the call for this building. We did a little bit of pre-work where we got in a firm of architects who've been involved in the original campus to do some concept drawings with us. And we said, look, we want to have some laboratories, and, you know, we'd have the usual questions about, you know, and where will the services go and where will the air handling be? And George says, and where will we get the cup of tea? You know, and that was, you know, again, that was really important because he knew how important it is for people to link. It wasn't about the technologies and the fume hoods and the airflow and where does the water come in and go out and all that sort of stuff. It was about getting the people together, which, you know, we were able to do to a certain extent in the old building, but then when we got this building, it really did set the place off. And that really brings me to my last point, again, going back to how he actually, you know, had eye to detail. When the actual call did come and the application form had to be filled in with all of the metrics, you know, and all of the history and what the prospective market would be, et cetera, et cetera. And myself, George, and David, who I see here in the audience, went up to Enterprise Ireland for what we thought would be an interrogation, but actually turned out to be, I think I said it in the car on the way back, that was the easiest 3.5 million or whatever number we ever got. And the interview lasted no more than three quarters of an hour. It wasn't an interview. It was actually just trying to get more information for them to go to their approval mechanisms. That was about the application, the eye for detail, the solid facts, and the reputation that George had built up in the sector with the assistance of his colleagues. So really, they were the few things I wanted to say. You know, on behalf of your colleagues, if I can take the liberty of speaking on behalf of all of your colleagues, George, through the years, both the ones that are your current colleagues and all of the past, some retired from the old GMIT, you know, I would like to thank you, you know, and wish you all of the best in the future. Getting into those clandestine projects, which I couldn't find, but are probably there somewhere in Roscommon, and the community projects that I know you've taken a passion in over the years. And to us, you always were George the First. Yes.
Thanks, Des, for that. It's just interesting how quick or how well the technology in ChatGTP has come along, because they've obviously removed that bias filter, because I put an awful lot of information about George McCourt into it, you know. But the other thing as well that you picked up on as well, I remember George telling me before that the kids say to him, if you give dad a biro and a piece of paper, he's happy for the rest of the day. So you definitely hit the nail on the head. And I suppose the one other attribute that I suppose about George, that, you know, he's very nuanced as well, you know. So even when you were actually talking there and you were saying about being prepared and having all your ducks in a row and, you know, taking slow steps, and, you know, maybe a pilot project is always one of George's favorite words. But that nuance element came out because he was looking over, smiling at me, saying to me, you know, without saying anything, I hope you're listening, you know, because as George used to always say, Turlock, sometimes you need the old dog for the hard road. Isn't that right, George? So I'm just going to bring you on to a speaker, Bertie Kelly. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it here today, but Bertie is the commercial manager at the National College of Ireland, but he's also a member of the Innovation Campus Network. And George, over the vast number of years, chairs that network. And that network was instrumental for some of the work that was done here in the iHubs itself. For instance, EI and the network worked together and putting together a COVID recovery grant. And that enabled us to fund the conversion of a number of units here in the centre itself. And that's just one of many projects that George chaired and managed during his time in the network. So Bertie sent me a video during the week. So I'm going to play the video now so you can just hear his few words. I hope to God that you can hear it.
George, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you sincerely for all your help and support over the years, and in particular for your time as chair of the Business Incubation Managers Network. The work that you did behind the scenes did not go unnoticed. Your commitment, patience, and ability to manage expectations kept the network thriving throughout the years. And it ensured that everyone had the opportunity to participate and contribute. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I want to wish you the very best as you embark on this next phase of your life. I've had the pleasure of meeting you and the family in Dublin over the years, and I've had no doubt that they will have lots of exciting projects for you when you're going to get to spend more time at home. And you will have many exciting exploits ahead. I will look forward to hearing more about those. But again, just a sincere thank you for all your help, both to NCI and to the network of incubation managers around the country. Thank you very much.
So, while George might embody the centre here, he's also, I suppose, a great promoter, and I suppose maybe a leader, and also a shoulder sometimes to cry on, but also someone as well that you can go to and you can have these confidential conversations sometimes for a lot of the startups that might be going through some difficult periods, as well as sharing a lot of the successes. And here today we have a number of some of our clients, some of our current clients, and we also have some of our alumni as well. And just to get, I suppose, a representation from some of the client companies that we have here in the building. So I'd like to invite up Margaret Ray, who's the CEO of Conry Innovation. And Margaret would have been on a number of our programs, including New Frontiers and the Empower program as well. And also now she's a client here in the company itself, in the centre itself, and her company is starting to scale and grow. So Margaret, please, if you could come to the podium.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm just going to go and do a little bit on what Conry is about, and thanks to George and his team here that kind of recognise that, I suppose, early on, and that's the reason why we're here. So if this works. Okay, so Conry Innovation, it's all about breaking the barrier to growth in fish aquaculture. And there is a huge ambition in the salmon industry to double production by 2030. So that puts us in a very good space here in Conry. There's a big problem with sea lice, you know, and if it's left go unchecked, you know, it can decimate not only the farm salmon, but also has implications for salmon beyond. Globally, it's the industry is worth 21 billion.
But the problem itself is 6 to 7 billion. But the main problem is actually it's the sea lice is an obstacle to growth in the industry itself, so it can't grow beyond. And so that's why we're trying to solve that problem for them. We look to Norway a lot because Norway is the global leader. They produce 50% of global production. And they're having significant problems. There's a map of Norway, and it kind of shows what the issues are there. Might be the wrong presentation. Some of the animations might not work later, but anyway, it's actually a 3 billion problem in Norway, and it's similarly a 3 billion problem in the rest of the world, and it has a lot of issues. So I think that George would be proud of the way that we pulled together all of that on one slide. It took a bit of effort. And here we go. So where do we fit in that, the farmer's toolbox side of things? There was a couple of things in here that I actually had to take out because of we're patenting and all the rest. So I couldn't reveal too much. And I know some of the team members are here, so apologies that I couldn't do that. But here, we're in the prevention side and we're in the monitoring side. We're not in the treatment side because we're non-fish contact. And that's where a lot of the problems arise in terms of mortalities and everything. So again, another great slide there that was pulled together by the team, and a slide that George certainly will appreciate. I could have shown you the technology, but then I'd have to kill you all, basically, kind of thing. So the one thing that I could show is some of the work that we're doing on artificial intelligence. So if you got a pen and you put just one single dot on a piece of paper, that's how large these things are in reality. So seeing them is very difficult, but they're very, very numerous in the environment in the salmon pen. So one female can produce up to 1,000 eggs a month. And depending on the water temperature, they either mature very fast in warmer waters or much slower in colder waters. What we're all about is reliably managing and controlling sea lice by reliably taking out these out of the water. So we had an AI intern working on this over the summer, looking at our biological digital image banks and going about trying to get the machine vision, machine learning piece working very well and identifying them correctly in the water so that we can terminate them basically. So I'm now going to go on to Conry's journey here in the iHub. So I suppose one of the first things I want to get across before going into that is how George has made, with his team here, a fantastic center that I, as an entrepreneur, can walk into and set up and move on, basically. It's just so smooth, it's so seamless, the transition from being outside to coming in here and being able to actually get into business straight away, basically. The ecosystem that's here, the connections, not only with the ATU and the greater ATU, but also with all of the agencies, like Údarás na Gaeltachta, obviously Enterprise Ireland, because it's an Enterprise Ireland sponsored centre, so to speak. But also Westbic, and then to the greater area, to the other business incubation centres, and who George doesn't know probably is they're not worth knowing. So, when you have all of that kind of ecosystem that you're sitting into, and George comes up and he says, Margaret, there's this thing over here that might interest you. You kind of pick up on it and you move on and you apply. Basically, it's a very nice way that he has to ensure that you actually apply for something. It's a very supportive environment here, and and they're very close to knowing where all the funding is and all of the various different calls that are out there as well that are appropriate for us, as opposed to, let's say, pure research in academia as such. And one of the great attractions for Conry coming here was actually a sink as well. Having a sink, it's really good for the biologists, that side of things. We do need that. And later on, I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So our first interaction in terms of the ATUI Hub was applying to the New Frontiers program, filling out that form, and Tony is here. So having a chat with Tony, kind of going, I don't understand this thing at all. Can you help me out with it? And so applying to it in May of 2020, and thankfully getting into the program. I wanted to understand, was there a business? There a business in this, or was it just purely kind of research? Was it academia? Was it maybe a hobby? But was there a business in it? So out of that, I knew that there was a business. I applied for this next round, next phase. I was knocked out of it. I was like, oh dear, what am I going to do next to keep me going? And I want to say that to everyone that's here. You know, if you are rejected, apply again, okay? Find out what's wrong. You know, why did you get rejected? Was there a fantastic competition? Or, you know, could you refine your pitch, basically? You know, refine that application. So in the meantime, I then continued looking for other places where I could go. So I went on to the Aquaculture Accelerator Program by BIM, which was really actually appropriate for us and helped us move on again. So then I reapplied, but this time around I reapplied to the Empower Start program. And all of the ladies on the Empower Start, who were fantastic in George's team, helping us move on with our technology and refining our pitch every single time. Then we got into, then in 2020, I actually formed the company in 2021, sorry, when I had a check coming in from consultancy, and I picked up the phone to Tony. I said, Tony, I'm not sure. I got a kind of a relatively large check for me. What'll I do? Will I set up the company or not? He says, now you have something. He goes, where, you know, you can set up a company, you know what I mean? He said, never set up a company unless there's a reason for it. Continue on as long as you can before actually setting up the company. So we set up the company then in 2020, you know, taking that a bit of advice on board. So then we applied for the phase 2 on the New Frontiers program, and we got through, thank God. Of course, it's Tony again, but who, you know, up to this point, I really didn't know so much about George in the background, or Margaret Charlton either from Enterprise Ireland. So, you know, you get to meet them and you get to see, you know, what are they judging your application on and everything. And, you know, it's really helpful. I remember every single time we came to those milestones at the end, we had to present to that board. You know, you know, you'd be full of trepidation while doing that, but it was great. You know, it really made sure that you had a really well-defined and very clear pitch by the end of it all. So then we got into phase 3 of the New Frontiers program after that. And then I was very fortunate to get the Women Tech EU award. So that was a great boon to us. And basically, throughout all of that program, we had clarified, I had clarified and clarified and clarified what it was that we were doing. And it was thanks to that we got the Women Tech EU. I'm absolutely sure about that. And of course, one thing to recognize is that during all of that was all during COVID. They had brought out a new building, he had equipped it and everything, kept all those programs going online. There was no drop, you know. So like, kudos to everybody, you know what I mean? It was fantastic, George, for yourself and your team, that you made all of that happen during like a real nightmare of a time, you know. And I was tuning in from home most of the time, you know, and you know, with the old masks coming in, you know, coming in here, I'd say, you know, the whole lot. But you kept it going, which is fantastic for us. Mike, I was very fortunate to reach out to the network and get connected to Mike Flynn. He's a former founder of another business called Capix Ocean, and a mechanical engineer. And because of the clarity of refining the pitch all the time, I was able to, I suppose, articulate the problem of sea lice in aquaculture. And he came on board simply because we had a very well-defined problem. We had a good way to solve it, and he thought it would really work. In his previous company, they had great tech that didn't really have a clearly defined problem. And because of that, he said, you know, that they had, you know, it was a lot more difficult in the early years, basically. But through all of that articulation, clarifying the pitch all the time, it was great that Mike came on board and came into the business. In terms of the rest, then at this stage now, I started to get to know everybody else in the business, because here in the A2I hub, and I didn't know that there were quite as many people. Another testament to it is that, you know, with the connection with ATU proper and all the rest, George and the team made sure that there were students here during the summer. So you'll see some of the students up here and the training that they would have received as well during that time. So these are all of the people I would have had some interaction with. And apologies for some, I couldn't get photographs, I was looking for, if you find that I've been trawling through your LinkedIn, this is the reason why, okay? It was to get those photographs. So we first came in and we came into unit 128, which is upstairs. And eventually we wanted to have a tank of water in here. And we were located upstairs, and we were upstairs over the fluoroscope. So basically, George, I think, might have been having a quite heart attack about having a lot of water up there on the next level. So after a little bit of time, we got relocated downstairs. So we got another unit downstairs, which was fantastic. And then as we got more funding in, we have another office now upstairs. So in May 23, we got the pre-seed start fund in. Again, really helpful, you know, the introduction to others like Westbig, who helped us, I suppose, pull together that pre-seed start fund application itself. That meant a lot, and we maxed out the amount that we could get through that. So we got the maximum of 100,000 out of that, and that helped us then support us bring in two more team members. So it helped us bring in two biologists, Isa and Raphael, and that helped us start to begin to build our biological digital libraries. Then we were very fortunate again to get the Marine Institute Industry Awards. So that was a 300,000 grant that we were, sorry, a 200,000 grant that we were able to get over a 3-year time frame, and that allowed us, along with some more funds that came in through the Circular Economy Fund, to actually hire more people. So then later in 2025, and this is really George tapping me on the shoulder going, oh, we really think your technology could be suitable for the European Space Agency. You know, consider putting in an application into it. So through concentrated effort with George and Kieran, I don't have your photograph up here. I should have your photograph up here, because Kieran was instrumental as well in helping us with that application and having some chats on the side and everything about, you know, how they evaluate you. My apologies. We were fortunate. We got through into the European Space Agency, the space solutions side of things. So we'll be doing that over the next 2 years as well. And it's great to have the European Space Agency logo and everything. We'll be putting that on our website shortly. So with all of that, as I said, we were able to hire more people, and we wanted them to start earlier. We were hunting for engineers really since about January of this year, but it was really, really tough to find them. The market, you know, they're fully employed basically, and perhaps the housing situation has an effect as well in that people just don't want to move because of the housing side of things. But we have hired an amazing senior R&D engineer. You'll see him there in the audience as well. So Brian Toby has joined us, and Jack McGovern, who unfortunately isn't here today, as a junior mechanical engineer, has also joined us. And then our AI intern, Lucas Togashi, has also joined us. So now we have almost a full complement of people. And then we moved on, and we were able to get an R&D aquaculture operations specialist to join the team. So now we're fully, you know, the team is full right now. And as we move on, we hopefully will expand a little bit more into the center here as well. So I just want to thank George and every single member of his team here for, you know, the extremely professional, supportive environment that entrepreneurs can find here. You know, it's a testament really to your professionalism and the team that you've appointed within the center itself. So much.
Back a few slides. Second. Let's get the picture of Margaret in the background. Thanks a million, Margaret. That's like looking at the timeline, Margaret's timeline that she put in, and I suppose the entrepreneurial journey as she came through the center. You know, for us, it's great that we can support those companies as they're going through the actual journey itself. And I suppose you could see as each of the different steps, the kind of the enrichment process as Margaret redefined what our business proposition was, what the value proposition was, and I suppose just in terms of how you can articulate that as well. And for us, it's really, it's great to be part, and just, even if we're external, it's great to be part of that journey itself. And the other real standout thing as well on our presentation was I was amazed how well I looked in that photograph of myself. So thanks for that. You must have been a bit of Photoshop, I say, airbrushing going on there. So now I'm going to invite up an alumni of ours, Liam Farsi, who would have come in, and he would have been a member when we had the old extension. I think it was around 2019. I think when you came in, and then he went, and when we got the new extension open, he moved across into the new extension, and that was, I suppose, enabled him to scale and grow his business as well. So, Liam, I'd like you to invite you back up to the podium. Thanks.
Well, I'm getting set up. I think I can add something to the chat GPT thing. So I think in startup circles, he's known as George. It's like Messi. So I think you were only confusing it by adding in these McCourts. But thanks, Starlock. Appreciate the opportunity to say a few words about George. And I normally shun any opportunity for public speaking, but I think it's important for me to say thanks to George, and not just for myself, but on behalf of all the clients that have came through over the years. I think the first thing I'll do is to compliment him on his vision. I think it's the first time that I've heard somebody design and build a custom room like this to host their own retirement party. I think it's definitely a new record in long-term planning. But as Turlock said, I was a tenant here with George from 18 to 21. And I think the best way for me to pay tribute to George is to explain the role that he played in our history over the years. So I think often, people say, you hear the expression in management or whatever, that you remember the way, you never remember what people said, but you remember the way that they made you feel. And unfortunately for telling the story, I do remember what he said. But I think more importantly, I definitely remember that, the really strong sense of confidence that he made us feel as a company. And I think it was very important for us. So I left my old job in 2018. I had the idea of doing a startup, and I had a few ideas that I were thinking about, and I was working from home. I decided I need to find an office to get a bit more serious. So I was introduced to George, and I set up a meeting with him. And at the time, we were in a kind of a stealth mode. We were kind of stealth mode when we didn't really know what we were doing ourselves. So he was actually the first person that I explained the CranMed business plan to. And he listened. I was up in his office upstairs here, and he listened, and I told him what we were trying to do. And he asked me a lot of questions about my background, and he asked a few other questions. And then he declared it sounded like a brilliant plan, and that my background was perfect for it, and I'd be ideal for it. And he said he'd be delighted to have us in the IHUBs. And then he showed me the office, and he said, it's there for you if you want it. And he said, I'll keep it for you. You just tell me you want it, and I'll keep it for you, and we'll sort out all the paperwork later. And now that all happened over the course of a meeting, and it was just one meeting. But for us, it was a critical step because he showed that he believed in our plan, and he gave me the confidence boost to confirm it might work. And then he took a personal commitment to work with us. And that was at a time when if we wanted to buy a ream of paper, we needed 2 credit references and a prepayment. So it was great to have somebody like that in our corner that was just willing to make a commitment to us. And actually, over the 7 years we've been in business, there's probably 3 or 4 meetings that I really remember in my mind. And that meeting with George was one of them. And I often think, well, it's a strange one to be stuck in my mind because, it was only a €400 commitment to take the room. It was a discount, I think. It was a very small room. But it really was, the fuel that got me over the hump to start the business and get us on the road. And I came away from that meeting with an office, but also with the confidence that that somebody else believed in us, and he was willing to link his success to our success. Anyway, I called him back. I said I was going to take the room, and he said, "Great. Have you got furniture?" I said, "I don't." He said, "I think I can hook you up with 2 chairs and 2 tables, but they won't be matching." And he said, "Leave it with me." And then, so that shows you, he was straight from the big picture of helping us with the company, straight into getting us furniture and chairs and getting us up and running. And then a week later I came in and he had the furniture in place, wasn't matching. And I think that's why he paints everything different color, because but he had the name on the door, and you know, there was no going back at that point. And you know, that was a brilliant experience for me, and as I said, one that I remember. But I came to realize that it's the same for everyone that went through here. You know, I think all the companies that have gone through here will unanimously agree, you know, that if you were an iHub client, George had your back. And if you were a former iHub client, George had your back, and you know, whatever he could do for you, he would. So he was a supporter and an advocate, and you know, there's never any room for negativity or for doubt with him. And I've never heard him say a bad word about any company that's been in here. That may well change on the road to Roscommon this evening, when he has a new sense of freedom. He might be cursing and blinding us, but when we were in here, you know, it was always positive and always forward and always thinking about the best of the companies. And, you know, I think the reason he's made such an impact is that he has a sense of optimism and positivity that just makes him perfect for the job. I think he sees the, you know, the positivity in everything you're doing. And I think importantly beyond that, he'll take that positivity and he'll nail his colors to the mast, and he'll go out and advocate for you. And, you know, it's not a silent positivity. He'll speak up for you in a forum, or he'll say, this guy might be suitable for that opportunity. And, you know, he as I said, he puts his colors to the mast and supports companies. So over the years, our needs changed, and a bit like Margaret, we're looking for more space and lab space and chemical handling and all that sort of stuff. And the reply was always the same. It's like, I'm delighted to see you're doing well. Leave it with me, and I'll see what I can do. And then usually, you know, within a week, there was some solution that came back. Some of them matched. And the other thing I'd give George great credit for is the culture in the building. You know, he's very helpful and positive to every company, and it rubs off on everybody else. You know, I think the running total, and Turlock might correct me, but I think it's over 50 million of grants that have been won from companies that are in this building. And I think it doesn't happen by accident. I think a lot of credit goes to George for that. I think, you know, making connections between companies and bringing speakers in and always looking for opportunities to add value to all of these companies has been a big part of that. And you know, I think in you know, in startup business, I think progress always comes from, you know, working the small openings and trying to make them into bigger openings and building on small things, you know. And I think nobody has done that with more kind of success or with enthusiasm than George. And just coming back to the grant, you know, in my own case, we'd been unsuccessful in grants, and I had a conversation in this room here with Simon from Blue Drop, and he was open enough to explain to me what he had done and how he had changed his outlook. And we did the same thing, and you know, it changed we were successful in grants after that. And it's these small things, you know, that set up the community and the collaboration and all that. And as I said, I think George is instrumental in all of that. And then I think when it came to time to move on from iHubs, it was the very same thing, you know, leave it with me. You just tell me a few weeks before you're going to go, and he'll sort it out. And then on the other side, you know, the landlord that I was moving into, 2 credit references and a year's prepayment. So I was thinking, right, the good old days are over. We're back to having to pay our way. So I'm certain that I can speak on behalf of all the past and present iHub companies in thanking him for the role he has played in all of our companies. I wish him well in the future, and I've really enjoyed working with him, and I'm grateful for his help and his friendship. And I hope in retirement he'll take a lot of satisfaction in knowing that I think he was the absolute best version of what an innovation centre director could be. And he absolutely can say he made a meaningful difference to I would say, dozens of different companies that worked here and that he helped to get off the ground. And I know he'll be rooting for all of us, and it won't be long in his retirement before he puts that positivity and energy into doing good for other people in a different setting. So thank you, George.
Thanks, Liam. Thanks for those. For a man who's not great at public speaking, think you did pretty well there. So well done. It's always the quiet ones you got to watch out for. Oh, that could be sooner than you think. So now I suppose this is the easiest link for me today, anyhow, in this presentation, because I don't need to do any introductions here because it's the man himself. So all I'm going to do is ask George to come up to the podium, and I'm sure he has a few words, but it might, expand into many words, but we see what he has to say for himself. Thanks, George. Yeah, so okay, needs to you log in there, Shane.
Yeah. I better do it so. So listen, thanks very much for all those kind words. My God, I'm wondering actually, who the hell was that about? I'm not exactly sure. I don't think it was about me. But anyway, look, I thought to myself, how can I sort of say a few words and how could I sort of wrap things up, as it were? And I thought I was going to do a few slides. I was thinking about it, talked to Turlock yesterday, and then I said, no, I won't bother with any slides. The day for the slides is over. I'll just talk and tell a few stories maybe as well along the way. So I grew up actually in a bar and grocery in Roscommon. It was one of these places that if you could picture it, it was, you get great pints in the pub. It was one of these places with sawdust on the floor. At that time, there would be no females or anything ever seen in the back part of this public house. But there was a grocery in the front. And that grocery would sell everything like, tea, bread, butter, bacon. We could also sell you a fishing tackle. And if you wanted a boblex bait, I don't know if Eugene is here today, but if he is, he's here at the back. If you wanted a good fly for fishing, we could sell that to you. Or we could sell you a Captain Peterson pipe. If you wanted that, we could do it. Or we could sell you a ball of blue. And I'm not sure how many people will remember what a ball of blue is, but anyway, you can ask me afterwards. But one thing I learned there was the unique focus on the customer at that early stage. So then I went on and I did electronics in NIHEUL, and I went to Dublin and I worked in a company called Amdal, and I fixed mainframe computers for quite a good few years. And then I moved into management. And in those days, which is going back a good while now, by the way, in those days, there was a huge focus on customer-supplier relationships and even the internal customer-supplier relationships within businesses. And I just learned an awful lot about defining customer requirements. What does the customer really, really want? And for me, running a place like this, that was key, because I had to really figure out, and sometimes they might not know themselves, but I had to figure out what's really needed here. So I started here in September 04. Can you imagine? It was that long ago, 20 years. The facility, the original building, was handed over to me in around 05. It was totally empty. I had a huge challenge to get the budget. I won't tell you some of the words I said. I mean, I had come from a scenario in Dublin where I was spending, I think, 12 million a year on print and et cetera, et cetera. I had severe difficulty getting approval here to spend 80,000. Anyway, let's just say we got that sorted after a quick visit to the president at the time, who happened to be Marion Coy. And we then proceeded to fit out the place and buy everything, the knives, the forks, the plates, the mugs, the furniture, everything. But I have to say, if you think back to that time, and like people often referred, when I was trying to get them to, come to me, if you like, from a startup point of view, and they would say, Sure, why would we go to Yiddish? It was only an old RTC. What the hell could that offer? This is real life. This is what I faced back that time. And you know, I often thought money was so tight. I thought to myself, Jesus Christ, I'll have to do a few Churchgate collections to get this thing off the ground. Who said that? There's still time. Yeah, we might need it. But Orla's here now, so things are different. But no, that is the truth. I mean, money was so tight, it was wow. People wouldn't realize it, you know. So anyway, I defined the criteria for entry. And right from the get-go, we were going to be very strict on who we let in. And then we were going to dovetail with the EI criteria, which essentially was, you know, they have to be using some type of technology or innovation in the startup, has to be able to create jobs, has to have an export potential, has to have revenues. And the other one I added myself was that the company, the startup, would have to have the capability for us to integrate research into it. Otherwise, we're going nowhere. We might as well build a warehouse. And this is some of the things that I even say to some of the managers I've met over the years. I mean, you know, if you look at what we're trying to do here, we're trying to create products and services that will compete globally, worldwide. We're not going to do that if we haven't research plugged in to these facilities in as much a way as we can. So the focus from day one was on the customer, and of course our customer was the entrepreneur. So it was entrepreneur-centric from day one. We then, after about 6 months, and by the way, it took me that length of time to figure out how the place worked, because I had come from private industry to public sector. Big difference. So I suppose in the early days, in a lot of the things that we were trying to do, when I was in the original building, the building was empty, but we were just trying to get the first few clients in. There was a lot of challenges in the sense that anything I was trying to do, that wouldn't work here, or you can't do that, or, you know, this wouldn't be in the procedure. So I then said to myself, Jesus, you know, what's happening here, like? And it took me that length to figure it out. And then I suddenly got a brainwave and I said, so what happens if I don't tell them what I'm doing? And essentially, without putting a tooth in it, that's what I did. So in the early years, and I mean, some of the senior people, they're not here now anymore, so I can say a few words. But I mean, essentially, without naming any names, I go into the meeting, the review meeting, and the building would be maybe 5 or 6 clients in it. And we would talk about, you know, the ones that were there and the ones that were coming, et cetera, and the vision, et cetera. And they would say, oh, Jesus, George, just fill the building, bring in the revenue. So I would say, yes, we'll sign up to that action. But I went outside the door and I did the exact opposite. Because they just wanted to bring in the revenue, which would, you know, maximize it. But if you bring in the revenue with the wrong type of clients, you can't get a silk purse out of a sow's ear. So the reality is we had to go back to basics all the time, and we had to work on that. And that's what we did. So I was able to delay, if you like, because I knew that I wasn't going back into the same review group for 12 months. The other thing was, I remember one of the first clients, one of the first early medtech clients we had. And remember, in the original building, it was just units. There was no medtech facility of any kind. But it didn't stop us from having a lot of successful medtech clients. And that's important to know. But we set up, obviously, the closed loop systems and the things we needed. But I remember a client came to me one day and they were in and they had a building and they had a unit and they were up and running. And he said, George, we need a fridge. And I said, you need a fridge? And he says, yeah. And I said, okay. I said, leave it with me. Like what Liam was saying, leave it with me and I think about it. So I went back to him then and I said, look, here's the way we're going to do this. You buy the fridge. You get the fridge delivered on a Saturday. You get the fridge up. It wasn't even on the ground floor. It was upstairs. You get the fridge up into that unit without any issue. I said, nobody's going to know about this fridge, only you and me. That's what happened. That is the God's honest truth. Bridge was in place. Nobody knew. Nobody died. Nobody died. So, I mean, I read a book recently, you know, and it was called First Break All the Rules. And in a way, I didn't break any of them, but I just walked around them and bent a few. But like we just simply could not make progress if we had to go the other way. Then after a couple of months, and say as the original building began to fill in that, we did a rebrand, because the original building was actually called Industry Support Centre, and they were the words that were used on the actual Enterprise Ireland application, which was all submitted before I actually arrived for the first original building, because it was in progress. So I didn't like those words because it just had a connotation of old, you know, oldness like about it. So I remember at some of the meetings where we tried to get a new name, and we did a lot of discussion on it, we did a lot of talk on it, and we couldn't get, I suppose, the name that I thought might be appropriate. We had to settle for a middle ground name, which was called Innovation in Business Centre. I see David Lee is smiling here now because he knows some of the things. But I mean, the reality is, you know, sometimes you have to just compromise and move on, and it'll get sorted out later on. Thankfully, we were able to change the branding completely to what's now known as the iHub for Galway and Mayo, and we got external help, and it was absolutely brilliant. And Turlock gave a huge amount of input to that, along with the external people, and you can see it around the place. And what I really liked about it as well is we had Oscuelige, we had Galway Bogus Mayo, Oscuelige underneath the brand. So we were still, you know, keeping true to our region, as it were. Then, just to say a few words on research, because people often ask me about it. And so what happened was, when I came in the beginning, I knew nothing about GMIT, knew nothing about Galway, spent 20 years living in Dublin, knew nothing about, I was going to say knew nothing about startups, but I was involved in a successful startup just before I had come in. But when I visited what was called the old GMed Tech at the time, which was the research facility, I was actually blown away with the capability that they had, more so than what they're seeing themselves. And I think this is a sort of a legacy for, you know, the GMIT, and even to some extent ATU doesn't realize how good it is. You put it all together, the jigsaw, the Med Centre, everything else that's going on, the innovation centres, the technology transfer people. Wow. And I could see that. But in the early days, I would do like I'd normally used to do. So I'd have a client, they wanted some research done, I'd call the meeting, we'd work with the researchers, we'd have the meeting would finish, that'd be grand, there'd be no minutes, there'd be no output, there'd be no actions. This is the reality. So I said to myself, okay, I have to adapt here now. So I said, I chaired the meetings. I did the minutes. I did the actions for the first few in the beginning. Because why? Because my clients needed the research. And there was just that little bit of a gap there. Thankfully, we've solved that gap completely. I mean, the Met Centre now is thriving, one is absolutely brilliant with the medical imaging suite and some of the work we're doing, incredible. But at the time, there was a lot of stuff that had to be done there. Then I just want to say, we did put in place an advisory board, which was very important. It was also actually part of the criteria for the original contract was you were supposed to put in an advisory board. Now, I don't think everybody did, but I want to just call out 3 names here that were massively important on the direction and strategy of this building and the original one, as it were. Carol Flannery, I know he's here. Thanks very much, Carol. Paul Gilson, I'm not sure if he's there. Thanks, and indeed Barry Egan. I know some of the Enterprise Ireland people will bring it back to Barry. And they were key. And in the early years, remember, we were doing well. We just had the original building. We were up and running. We had some medical companies in the building, which was amazing because we had no R&D units or anything. But it was that advisory board that actually convinced us to focus completely on medtech. Because at the time we were doing lots of different, and it wasn't focused, and there was no sort of strategic strategy. And I can remember those meetings, and that output has been monumental for us, because I then had to start thinking about medtech. It didn't mean that we had a couple of software as a service ones underneath it, but it was medtech focused, and that was hugely important. On the programs, I want to say a few words on the programs. We have New Frontiers. It was mentioned earlier by Margaret, which is great. Thanks for that. And Tony is here. We also had the Empower program, dedicated female program by Maria, and I think Michelle is here today. And that was very important because what they allowed us to do was to build an entrepreneur pathway. So we could bring in people from industry into either Empower, into New Frontiers, work through the procedures and the program there, and then come into the iHub. And I want to mention a couple of companies, not them all, but just a few off the top of my head, that were very important. New Frontiers successes, which is a credit to Tony, but who actually came into the buildings, the likes of Truck Science, Citadel, Chipwright, CGA Technology, One Touch Health, BioWave, Rockfield Medical, just to mention a bunch of them. Incredible, who originated with the Enterprise Ireland funded New Frontiers program. Now, I'll take a drink of water before we go to the extension, I think. The extension was tough. I mean, most of you that are here would realize that were here at the time. It was a game changer, though. The reason we needed the extension was simply because, from a funding point of view, the original building didn't pay for itself. So you're in a loss-making scenario. So I would have to go into the management meetings inside, monthly management meetings. The only thing that's been coming up on the red on the spreadsheets was the iHub, because it was at a loss. And the only way to fix it, one way anyway, was build an extension, get more units, break even. So I did a huge amount of work on that, knew that if we doubled the capacity, we could break even. So the Buildings and Estates team, David Lee and his team, were absolutely super critical in this. And I remember going back with myself and Dave, and David is here too, and thanks for coming, Dave, and the support over all the years. We had many, many discussions, and Dave said to me one day, do you know, George, that this new extension iHub building will be the first new building on the GMIT campus in something like 15 years. That was pretty good, that we could go out there, get the money to do that. I mean, times were hard. We had gone through recessions and all that as well. But that's what happened. We had actually, in the design process, we put a huge amount of effort into it. We went around, we visited all the best in class in Ireland, and we looked at, we had a new architect, which was interesting. We had a new contractor never used by the college before. So we were putting our neck out on the line. It'd been much easier to use some of the people that were there, but we felt that the better solution was from these people. And the impact of it was massive. 100% increase in capacity, larger units, actually now R&D units, which we never had before, an event space like this, breakout spaces. And what it allowed us to do, which we didn't sort of know at the time, but what it allowed us to do was we were able to then cater for larger startups. Like, for instance, I have startups here now in the building that have 3, 4 incubation units, some of them, that have grown to 15 and 20 people. Medical device startups. They're the size of SMEs. Do you know what I mean? When you put it into perspective and you see what Enterprise Ireland are talking about, we have SMEs in this building, many of them. And we're delighted and we're very proud of that. And a lot of those have went on over the years and been successful. So somebody mentioned there the ICM. It was Bertie actually, and I want to thank Bertie, in remote for saying a few words. But for my sins, and I had a lot of sins, Jesus, over the years, but for my sins, I chaired the Incubation Centre Manager Network. I suppose maybe for around 10, 12 years, partly because Sean, who was a previous chair, wanted me in there, so I went in. But then when you're in there, it's very hard to get out. You know that, it's very hard to get out. And we started off with 13 IoTs, and Enterprise Ireland were there, and we'd meet 3 or 4 times a year. It was massively important because I learned about what all the rest of the IoTs were doing. And I learned about all their incubators. And that didn't fall on deaf ears. Plus, you had the direct link with EI. They were the funders. I can't say enough about EI in a positive way. People used to accuse me one time years ago in the tough times in the recession, and they're saying, you should be working for EI. Sure, look, it's part and parcel. It's one goes with the other. So we got out of that things like shared learning. It was absolutely massive. So I want to just talk about the KPIs, because for me, from day one, I used to be paid, big bucks in Dublin for the results. That was the way it worked, the bonus at the end of the year. And, that doesn't, leave you, if you like. So for me, from day one, I knew we wanted results, even though there was nothing. It was a greenfield situation. There was no old big ranting here in GMIT when I came. But I remember there was a phrase, begin with the end in mind. And anybody that read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, it's habit number 2. And what you do is you start with where you think you want to be, and you sort of work in reverse. It's quite interesting when you do that, because you really see what you have to deliver on to get there. Was the research important? Without the research integration, forget it. We'd have been mediocre. And the benefit to ATU now would be very, very small. And the benefit to the economy and to Ireland Incorporated would be a lot smaller. So I just preferred to let, if you like, the results do the talking. And over the years, look, you know them all, well over 320 million of investment funding, 8 acquisitions. Now that's interesting. That means somebody values what's going on here. I mean, some of those acquisitions, people in the room here were involved in them. Novate Medical, Varian Medical, Uravi, Clada Medical, Northev, Game Golf, Trade Cert, Cloud Strong. There's a couple of them there from the Mayo hub as well. Well over 1,700 jobs, well over 60 high growth companies which meet the criteria for Enterprise Ireland, well over 200 plus student engagements, which Orla was talking about earlier. Very, very important. Over 600 plus entrepreneurs trained with Tony and the programs and Maria. And critically, 74% of the clients still in business after 7 years. That's a metric. That's a big metric. So some of the alumni, and I'm just going to mention a few of these names, alumni, people that have left us that were here one time, Blue Drop Medical, Marveo Medical. In fact, Chris, I don't know if he's here, but Chris Davey was here and came up to my office this morning to shake hands with me. And I was saying, Jesus, 15 years ago. That's what it was, 15 years ago when I met him in the beginning. There you go. Cran Med, and thanks to Liam for saying the few words. Smart Reactors. And then we've a whole heap of current clients, obviously, Origin Medical, Envira Medical, Timpani Medical, Simsys Medical, Nua Surgical, Lanua Medical, Endowave, Ronspot, Conry Innovation, Precision Sports Technology, Isovac. The list goes on, just mentioning a few of them. And a lot of them came from, the original, the BioInnovate program in Galway, and then had several, many years before they'd come and look for us to work on the rest of that and help them to deliver products that could compete globally. Some of the things that stuck in my mind that were key in relation to the metrics were the funding and how the funding changed. Like back about 7 or 8 years ago, there was a massive shift in funding to Europe. And once we saw that happening, then we had to adopt to figure out what is this money in Europe? How do we get it? How do we help our clients to get it? So things like fast track to innovation funding, things like European Innovation Council funding. The other thing that I was very proud about was the 12 DTIFs, the Disruptive Technology Innovation Fund by Enterprise Ireland. They totaled 47 million alone. Those 12 were got by clients in the iHub at the time. It's incredible. And really, really what's important, this is the sweet spot for ATU. 4 of those had the research partner organization, the MET Centre, which is the Medical Engineering Technology Centre here in ATU. So for me, if we had all that money coming in, but none of it being spent in the research centres, sure, we're not getting the synergy. We're not getting the benefit. So that's why I worked on that very, very early on. And I'm delighted. I know Jamie isn't here because he sent me an email in advance. But I'm delighted with Jamie and his team that are here to help us out going forward. One of the other big things that was a big day for us was the day that Rockfield Medical got the FDA approval. First ever FDA approval in the building of a client. Wow. We went out and we had a few pints that night. Like that was big. I mean, that doesn't happen very often in many other incubators. The other thing I suppose is, and in general, you know, the first in human trials, I'd always love to get the results, and when they are positive, and like that's happened with many, many, many of those, it's part of the process they have to go through. That was hugely important for me. Other items that were important was the sustainability award that we got with Galway Chamber, and Turlough Raftery was the driver of that. And that was very important at the time. It was a reflection of how we built the sort of sustainability into the new building. And I don't want to forget the 6 Swift boxes, which David Lee helped me integrate into the building way back after a pilot trial run in the original building. So they're important things too in their own right. But also the linkages with ATU, and I'm just going to pick out one in particular, which I think says a lot. So in the early years, we had a company called Nortev. They did a nebulizer for thoroughbred horses. And they were here, small units. They eventually expanded into 2 units in the iHub. And we were all the time trying to integrate students. So we got a student from GMIT at the time, and they worked on a student project. Then when they were finished, they had to go back and finish their degree. They worked then, I actually think they worked for some free time because some of the companies just didn't have funding depending on the cycle. But then they got a contract, a 1-year contract, which is great. Then they worked in several operations roles. They were the senior export manager. Today, Matt Walsh, we're very proud of you. He came from the Pharma and Chemical Science degree in GMIT. He's the CEO of Nortev. How the hell good is that? You know what I mean? It shows what can be done. I mean, Nortev were actually acquired. He's still the CEO. A company called Parry, a French company, bought them out there. So, but that's so important because it shows the students, it shows the potential and what's there. So bear with me, I'm coming near the end. Now, collaboration, just a few small things on collaboration. Orla said to me a good while ago, European Space Agency, would you look and see, could we join that? And I said to myself, oh, Jesus Christ. I didn't say it to Orla, but anyways, she knows it now. But anyway, why? Because it was fraught with work and challenges. But I'm delighted to say, after whatever, 10 months later, whatever, ATU were approved to join the European Space Agency Consortium. And I'm absolutely thrilled that Margaret Ray, who spoke earlier, got one of the pieces of funding from that and would not have got it if we weren't aware of it. And Turlock helped me massively in trying to get that. And there was another company in Sligo that actually got it, that came through the New Frontiers. Again, simple things that are important. The second thing is our collaboration with Life Tech Group and Resolution Medical. And I think I see Marco there. Put up your hand, Marco. So this man, Marco, we have partnered with him, and they provide the beating heart models, the beating lung models. We did the demo there. A lot of you were at those demos. We're doing another one later between now and sort of Christmas. But that collaboration, hugely important. Resolution Medical as well, manufacturing facility in the States of Minneapolis. Look, it just added more value. And we do whatever we can. It's all about the clients. What did I say in the beginning? Entrepreneur-centric. Forget about all the other fluff and all the other stuff. Just worry about the entrepreneurs and bring them on. Everything else will happen. And the last collaboration, Orla mentioned it there, and we won't say what went on, of course, out in Chicago, but we signed a memorandum of agreement with the University of Illinois in Chicago just recently. And it has massive, massive potential. We're 18 months working on it. It is to do with, broadly speaking, technology transfer of technology from their university that's there, that they have, that is not being sort of utilized. And guess who can do it? We can do it. We can bring it that final couple of meters that's needed. So that collaboration is very important, and I'm looking forward to seeing in the years to come, new products developed out on the marketplace between ATU and UIC that's solving real world problems today in the medical space. Now, when I was doing this and I was preparing a bit and I was saying, will I say anything about the ones that got away? And then someone was saying to me, Jesus, ones that got away. Well, there actually was a few. And this, I suppose, is for the entrepreneurs in the audience, because, look, I could write a book, but it mightn't be good. I might have a lot of legal suing afterwards. But anyway, the ones that got away, Shinshke, there was a few. But all I'd say to you is that it wasn't the technology. In 9 times out of 10, it wasn't the technology. In 9 times out of 10, it wasn't the market. In 9 times out of 10, it wasn't the funding. Even though funding is super critical to get, it was the promoter. Just think about that. In 9 times out of 10, on all the failures I've seen, which you could count on those 2 hands, promoter issues. Now, I want to move on now to thank a number of people, and I have a good few people just to thank, and I hope I don't leave out anybody. It's always a danger when you go to pick some names that somebody will be left out, but I think it's important. And the first thing I want to do is just to remember Tricia Carrick, who RIP 10 years ago, and or 10 years worked with us actually in the iHub. I think it's important we'd say that today. The other very important group is David Lee and his group. We mentioned that earlier. On a load of fronts, on a monthly, weekly basis. God, we can't keep these facilities going without them. So I just want to thank David, Cahill, Corina, Keith. There's another Keith, there's 2 Keiths there. Sean, Noel and Doreen. Delighted that we could work with them, and I'm so grateful for their help. IT services and AT support, all of this sort of kit stuff, look, they're critical to us as well. I want to thank Chris, Liam, Tom, Pat, Ivan, Niall and Laura. Then there's 1 or 2 in finance, Claire, that we work very closely with, and indeed the rest of the finance team that I've worked with over the years. I want to just mention Deirdre in HR, and there's a bunch of others in HR. And then I want to come to my own team. So look, I mean, people talk about, you know, George and this and that and the other, and you know, Liam was saying there, you know, he's just known as George. I was often called it out worse, by the way. Often. But I want to thank Maria, I want to thank Michelle, and I want to thank Barbara from the Mayo Hub. I want to thank Turlock, Christine, Emma, and Shane from the Galway Hub. I want to thank Keola and Rory from Sligo, and Patsy and Michelle from Donegal. So it's only in the last sort of 12 months that we had started to work with those managers and staff there. I also want to thank Des and Chris over the years. I've worked with Des in many different shapes and forms over the years, and I've worked with Chris there in the recent time. And I have a special thanks for Dr. Orla Flynn, because like all down through the years, the support was there. And I think what was really critical was, as you said yourself, you knew the environment that I was in from the CIT scenario. And there was lots and lots of challenges on the way. But like, look, we didn't let them stop the progress. We didn't let them stop us from actually delivering. We had to duck and dive or whatever a lot of times, but we got there. So thanks, Orla, very much for that. And I'm going to finish now, and I just want to finish on a small story that, you know, it struck me. So the small story was that I was coming into work one morning, early in the morning, only a few weeks ago, after I had told people I was retiring. And it's funny, you park the car and you walk in, and there was someone else coming in who's actually, I think he's in the audience, and he was here. And he looked at me and he said, "George, you're out the gap." He never said another word. I'm out the gap. Thank you very much.
So if you like those stories and you want to hear a little bit more about George's, I suppose, not topsy-turvy, but focused journey through the iHub over the years, is myself and George earlier in the week, we did a short fireside type of chat, and we recorded it. So we put it up on our YouTube channel. So there's a QR code there that'll bring you to it. So if you want to hear, it's very difficult to cover everything over the years. But I'm going to tell you something now that George doesn't even know. In my office, I have just behind me where I sit. So there's a notice board there, and I have a cartoon from the New Yorker there. In the cartoon, there's a picture of a man that doesn't look a lot like, he's not too dissimilar from what George looks like. And the man is looking down. Looking up at him is a cat. Beside the cat, there's a litter box, and the caption says, "Never ever think outside the box." And I think in the case of George always thought outside the box. But in my case, it was Turlock. Don't think outside the box, because many a time I go up to George and say, "George, can we do such and such?" You go, "Jesus, Turlock, you can't do that." But you know, I'm learning from the master. So I realize if I work within my limits, I can get things done. And another anecdote I'll tell you was, there was a time when the Empower program started off, and Maria, who manages the centre up in Mayo, she was basically furloughed and she was put on to coordinate and run the Empower program. So I was up in Mayo, running the centre in Mayo. And the extension was underway at the time. I think it was just a little bit before COVID. And I had a call with George, and George said, he was under pressure. There was a lot of work going on, and David and the team were there. But, it was quite a small team and an awful lot of work to be done. And there was a very tight budget and a tight timeline as well. And also there was the problem that we had an existing centre that was up and running, and there was clients in the centre. So you were trying to schedule and manage the works without disrupting the clients, because we didn't want to lose any of the clients that we had as well. So George came to me and he said, Turlock, would you be interested in coming down to Galway, just, to give me a hand, maybe 1 day a week? I was thinking, well, I'm up here in Mayo now, kind of managing the centre, but, as Liam said, when George has the chat, he gives you that self-belief in yourself. But in my case, I always had belief in George, and I always had belief in George's vision. So I said to myself, you know what, I'll come down for the 1 day a week. That 1 day a week then transpired into 2 days a week. And then by the end of it, I was down here 3 days a week. I still had to go up to Mayo as well and run the centre up in Mayo. But look, the journey has been really inspiring, I have to say. So what I'm going to show you now is basically, I suppose the extension is part of George's legacy. So I have a short video here which just kind of captures, I suppose, it gives you a timeline on the actual extension itself. And then it's going to say a few final words. So, folks, I suppose really to wrap it up, as George has said, he's getting off the bus, but the bus is moving on. Unfortunately, without him. But George, just from my own personal perspective, I have to say you've been a great mentor and a leader to myself. Okay, and you've been very inspiring as well. And so, for me, it's been both an honor, it's been a privilege, and it's also been a pleasure as well. So, I want to thank you just for having the opportunity to work with you over the years. And I suppose on behalf of everybody that's here and all the different groups that are represented in the room, I want to wish you a long, happy, healthy, and a fun-filled retirement. So just finally, we have a small token, as Shane has it here in his hands. Don't drop it, Shane. And we just like to present you. So maybe Orla, and I'd ask all of the iHub RNI team, for everybody to come up, please, and we'll get a photo. So Michelle and Annie, Tony, and whoever is in the room, Kiola, Finola. I won't mention all the names, but come on up, you know who you are. Yes. Karen. We see someone now taking photo.